Hello and welcome, I'm Olas Garjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. 36% of Ukrainian citizens think that Ukraine is moving in the right direction, while 39% are convinced that it's the opposite. These are results of the most recent public opinion poll conducted jointly by the Democratic Initiatives Foundation and Kyiv International Institute of Sociology. To talk more about the survey results, we welcome to the studio today Serhii Shapovalov, political analyst at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio. So we all remember this euphoria, so to say euphoria, right after the Ukrainian powers changed and half a year after the new president was elected and 3 months after the new Ukrainian parliament started its work. Now we're talking about the majority of Ukrainians fearing that the country is failing and the country is moving in the wrong direction. Could you please expand a little bit more on that, on this wrong direction, and what is this wrong direction about?
We asked our citizens about their general emotional evaluation of everything that happens in our country, in the political sphere. We deliberately haven't asked about something specific.
So to say wrongdoings.
Yeah, we just asked about general impression.
The general mood.
Yes, whether Ukraine moves in the wrong or whether everything is good or everything is bad. And we have sort of unexpected data, but they also could be expected. We had some increase of optimism among our citizens after elections. But now the situation is becoming more balanced, about equal numbers. 36–39% of people think that developments that country goes in wrong or right direction. But earlier, since 2015, we observed a more dramatical difference. For example, even a year ago, in August 2018, 72% of people expressed the opinion that country is going in the wrong direction, while only 11% of people said that everything is going okay in our country. So we see the difference 7 times. We had 7 times more pessimists than optimists. And now the numbers become more balanced. So we return to our stable situation when our citizens are inclined to evaluate the developments in our country as rather bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, could you please explain us, is this downwards a usual thing, a usual mood shift after this election period in Ukraine, or is this something new in Ukraine?
We expected this decrease of optimism because every elections we have such a trend when directly after elections, our people express their hopes that newly elected authorities will conduct reforms expected by our citizens, reforms, and half a year after elections, people become less enthusiastic, and they start to rationally evaluate what was done, rather than expressing hopes and their trust to newly elected authorities.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting now to ask what was done and what do people think what was done in Ukraine since the new president took the office and the new parliament started work?
Now we see an interesting situation. We conducted another public opinion poll in August, 3 months ago, and about 60% of people expressed positive evaluations of first steps and decisions of Volodymyr Zelensky, and now the situation has not changed. About 60–62% are satisfied with his and his team actions, but the number of people who negatively evaluate president's actions has increased. It may sound illogical, but we have decreased number of people who have not defied with their attitudes. I mean that in August we had 24% for whom it was difficult to say whether first steps of president are positive or negative. Now we have about 14%.
And so this number of neutral decreased.
Yes, the number of neutral evaluations has decreased, and those 10% of people moved to rather negative category. And it is a signal for our powers. Still, they have very high public support in our country, but people who were not inclined to support these authorities from the very beginning, these people start to rather negatively evaluate first decisions made by President and Verkhovna Rada.
This is very interesting. Could you please tell us who are these people? Do we have this data from the survey? Who are these people? I mean, supporters of what political parties are they?
Of course, we have more supporters of newly elected authorities among people who voted for Sluga Narodu,
servant of the people,
servant of the people in these parliamentary elections. Criticals are the people who voted for Golos party, for European Solidarity Party. It's nothing unexpected here. The main thing to understand is that every number which I tell you is a result of representative public opinion poll with a margin of error on the level of 2.3%. And when I say that 60% of people still support our president, I mean that it is a situation for the whole our country, not the certain societal group, but for the whole our country, with a margin of error of 2%, but it is still some level of precision. And some people live in a sort of information vacuum. For example, a person may support this or that politician, and friends and acquaintances of this person do also support certain politician, and living in this situation, such a person may have a wrong impression that everyone in the society supports this or that politician, or supports this or that decision. Policy decision, I mean, and these numbers which I tell you, which I present, represent the situation in the society as a whole.
Very unexpected situation, because on one hand, the majority of Ukrainians are dissatisfied with the direction that, excuse me, the country is moving to, but on the other hand, the majority of Ukrainians still keep the trust in the current President Volodymyr Zelensky. And now I want to ask you, what political decisions of Volodymyr Zelensky do Ukrainians support the most, and what political decisions do they react the most fiercely on?
We studied public attitudes towards several mostly discussed decisions, and what was unexpected for us is that 75% of our people support not support, but rather think that it is acceptable for Volodymyr Zelensky to initiate direct negotiations with the President Vladimir Putin. Another issue is that 60% of our people support the decision about the disengagement of troops in Donbass. We now, of course, we all observe that these questions are highly discussed in the public sphere.
And this is a situation. Yes, these questions, they have been highly debated over, and it's very interesting to see that the majority of Ukrainians, they do support these decisions, not like the Ukrainian politicians and political experts that would not recommend Volodymyr Zelensky to do so.
For us, it may be obvious that direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin implies many risks, but most of our citizens, as we see, think that it is not. It is okay. We will not lose anything from just the fact of negotiations. And some people do underestimate the risks which are connected with such negotiations.
So what other political decisions would you outline as successful and not successful?
What about not successful decisions? We see that a decision to open land market is not supported by our people. About 58% of Ukrainians expressed the opinion that that it is a wrong decision, and we see that really all public opinion polls show negative public attitude towards this issue.
People are not ready to open the land market in Ukraine.
Yeah, there are still some myths, some public fairs that here foreigners will come and buy
all the agricultural land.
All the Ukrainian.
Although it's interesting that this aspect was in the political agenda of the Volodymyr Zelensky since the very start. So, I mean, people supported Volodymyr Zelensky on the elections, but at the same time now, when it comes to this decision, people are fiercely against. This is very interesting too.
This is an issue. This is a very sensitive issue for our citizens, and in some other spheres, some other reforms, people are less inclined to think deeply about the content of reform. People just believe that Volodymyr Zelensky is able to resolve problems in judicial reform, in our healthcare, in everything. But the question of land reform became very sensitive for our people, and still many people do not. Many people haven't read the legislation which is adopted now, but it is more like emotional evaluation that it is not acceptable to sell Ukrainian land at all.
Well, people are not used to it. For decades it was forbidden, and now Ukraine is willing to open the market, so of course there should be some educational and preparational works towards this. So land reform, what else?
Also about the decision, negative attitudes do also prevail about the decision of privatization of big state enterprises. Of course, here we also have public fears that these state enterprises will be stolen by oligarchs. And these are the main questions which influenced the public support of newly elected authorities. And we have rather unexpected result that these decisions influenced more public attitudes towards Verkhovna Rada than towards Volodymyr Zelensky.
And this is interesting.
We have the result that about 47% of people are dissatisfied with Verkhovna Rada actions, and
which is almost a half.
Is almost a half, and it is by 13% more than the part of people who is satisfied. And of course, not only these decisions which contradict public opinion influenced such attitudes, but also scandals with members of parliament, which occur every week. Some dissatisfaction or even disappointment with ruling party, scandals with the members of ruling party. We know that 3 members of parliament from the ruling party are now excluded from it.
Right.
And
how would you compare this political climate with the situation 3 months ago, when the parliament was just making its first decisions in the end of August?
It was too early to evaluate public attitudes toward the Verkhovna Rada 3 months ago, but as of August 2019, people elected members of parliament, and people had high expectations and high level of trust. Now, after 3 months of certain decisions, of certain scandals, of course we have a part of people who are disappointed with the people whom they voted for. And of course it's harder to judge Verkhovna Rada than Volodymyr Zelensky. Volodymyr Zelensky is a single person, and Verkhovna Rada consists of 450 members of parliament, and even if we take a person who supports Servant of People party, this person observes everything that happens in this building, how their members of parliament from the opposition parties behave, even scandals with members of Servant of People party, and step by step people become disappointed in our members of parliament, and public image, the whole emotional impression of our Verkhovna Rada goes
is very much down. Well, unfortunately, the trust to the Ukrainian authorities has been always an issue in Ukraine, and now we see that after this, as I named in the beginning of our conversation, euphoria about the newly established parliament, about the newly elected president, now we see some
decline of this.
Some decline of this, some kind of shift in the moods among Ukrainians. And also, I know from your survey, and this is going to be the last thesis to briefly discuss, that a third of the population allows re-election of the Verkhovna Rada of the Ukrainian parliament. So what is your forecast as a political analyst? Can this convocation actually happen, or will there be re-election?
It's hard for me to say. I do not see certain preconditions for this now. It's too early. But as we heard from our president, he thinks that it is possible, of course. And this high result, that 33% of our people think that re-elections will be in the near future, shows us that our people are rather pessimistic about our officials.
Parliament.
It's like it's also about general emotional impression. Our people just do not believe that our members of parliament are able to
do their work,
to do and adopt constructive and useful decisions.
Well, I hope that this survey is going to be a lesson for the current parliamentarians, and maybe they will take it into account and pay attention to the results. Thank you so much for these comments.
Commented about our research.
So
they're aware about these numbers.
They're aware
so
of
we
these
hope
numbers.
that our numbers will influence their behavior.
Let's hope on that. So far, I thank you for this conversation, and thank you so much for being a guest today in the studio.
Thank you.
That was Serhii Shapovalov, political analyst at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay tuned for more with UATV.